So with so many things changing and characters we thought to be immortal dying, everything we thought we were certain about is beginning to shift. And as a result, I am no longer certain that Blackbeard will be the final villain of the story. Because as I reread and see certain moments between Imu and the Gorosei, I'm really starting to lean in that direction. Imu could very well be the final villain of One Piece. But again, I'm not 100% certain on that. So today we're going to do a deep dive into the 3 potential options on who the final villain could be, so as to hopefully finally answer the question once and for all. Who is the final villain of One Piece? So of course, right from the beginning there are 2 names that come to mind immediately when talking about One Piece's final villain, Imu and Blackbeard. We'll begin by discussing why Imu is highly likely to be it before moving on to Blackbeard, and then finally discussing the 3rd potential option for who it may be. And then after everything has been laid out in front of us, we'll make our final decision on who we think is the most likely option for One Piece's final villain. So without wasting any more time, let's begin with Imu-sama. Imu to this day is still one of, if not the most mysterious characters in the entire story. Like, we have still yet to get any confirmation on their true identity or what their true face actually looks like. But what we do know for certain is that she and the government are without a doubt some of the most evil beings in the entire series. They are essentially the ones responsible for almost all the bad things that have ever happened in the story up until now. And one other thing that we know for sure is that Luffy will have to defeat them and free the world before the end of the series. But does that mean Imu, the Gorosei and the Holy Knights are the final villains of this story? Well, honestly, at one point in time I would have just simply said no. Imu being the final boss just isn't impactful enough, and making a blacked out silhouette the big bad is kinda dead in my opinion. But what I have found when researching for this video has begun to make me think differently. First off, the entire meaning behind the Will of D is to defeat Imu, who with her demonic origin also makes her the natural enemy of the gods, which is what Luffy has become. But I'll cover more on Imu's suspected origin in another video, so subscribe so as not to miss that. Imu and the world government have also been the overarching enemy since the beginning of the story, and every enemy / pirate that has come so far in the story are all just kind of a result of their actions. Like Joy Boy, as far as we know, only became the first pirate of all time to directly oppose Imu and her rule over the world. Which also indicates to me that as it stands currently, on top of that pyramid of evil sits one blacked out silhouette. Which to me does tend to indicate that Imu being the ultimate evil / final villain of One Piece is incredibly likely. And that's not even mentioning how Imu and Luffy also coexist in opposition to one another. Like Luffy, as we all well know, represents freedom, peace and joy, whereas Imu represents total domination, control and manipulation. It's quite simply a story of good versus evil in its simplest form, just one that kinda spans over the course of 800 years. And if we're being truly unbiased, having Imu as the final villain of the story would also just fit in with the whole final boss being also the strongest character of all time storyline trope that we've all seen used many times in the past. The only real issue that I could possibly make for why Imu couldn't be the final villain is that Luffy versus Imu just isn't personal enough, and simply just doesn't have enough on the line for the final fight. Which may sound kinda crazy when you also consider that this is a fight to free / save the entire world. But as far as I can see, Luffy, outside of being asked by someone to defeat them, wouldn't actually care enough to do it. Because as we've seen in every single fight up until now, Luffy didn't do any of them because he had to do it or because he wanted to be a hero or to be praised. He did it because he wanted to for someone he considered a friend in each and every arc. So outside of being asked to do it, I just don't see this fight actually taking place. But now let's move on and discuss the truly unpredictable and dangerous villain who's always been lurking in the shadows. Someone whose plans have their own plans. It's Blackbeard. Blackbeard being the final villain of One Piece is highly likely, for a number of reasons, with the biggest being that Oda has been building on his character since as far back as episode 80 on Drum Island. Which, just for perspective, is around 800 episodes before any mention of Imu in the entire story. Now Blackbeard is also about as evil a character as One Piece has ever actually seen, being credited with a kill on his own division commander, which in the world of One Piece where friends are everything really speaks volumes on his desire for power. And let's not forget that since Blackbeard first appeared in the series, he has done nothing but win and achieve everything he has ever sought after. He went from being an actual nobody on Whitebeard's crew to the man who not only captured Ace but also killed the strongest man in the entire world, Whitebeard. And not only did he kill him, but he also stole his devil fruit and became the first to ever wield 2 devil fruits at the same time. He then went on to beat Marco, took Whitebeard's territory and became a Yonko of the Sea in such a short period of time that it's actually crazy to imagine. Like, it's only because of his limited appearances that it's easy to forget what this man has actually accomplished in his short time as a pirate captain. But when it's actually laid out in front of you like this, it's hard not to imagine him as not only the final villain of the story, but also the man who is potentially destined to become the Pirate King before even Luffy. Because think about it, if Luffy is the embodiment of freedom, then Blackbeard is most definitely the embodiment of fate. Because if you're like me and you have this twisted desire to go back and only reread the chapters and panels that involve Blackbeard and his crew, then you will also realize that almost every single major moment in the series has in some way a connection or reference to fate itself. For example, think of Impel Down. He and his crew were on death's door due to Magellan's poison, until as fate would have it they came across Shiryu, who just so happened to have on his person the cure for Magellan's poison. And then again, when he was on his way to Water 7 to capture Luffy, fate just so happened to drop Ace right into his lap, which of course has led to so many favourable outcomes for him and his crew. Fate is and has always been on the side of Blackbeard. Like, think about it. Who else in the entire series could leave for a couple of days after capturing Kobe, only to return and find out that as fate would have it, he has now been switched out for none other than the hero of the Navy, Garp himself. And of course, given that One Piece has always been a story about freedom and fate clashing, it's only logical that the final fight will be between the two who embody both free will and fate, Blackbeard and Luffy. But then how might this fight actually finally take place? Well, it is my belief that as Luffy fights Imu and the Gorosei for world freedom, Blackbeard will do as he's always done and lurk in the shadows until the time is right for him to come out and steal his third and final fruit from Imu herself. A fruit that will also subsequently lead to him being placed as the new ruler of the entire world. Because once again, to tie back to how he is essentially the anti-Luffy, I don't see his ambition being limited to just ruling over the pirates. I have always seen Blackbeard as someone who wants it all: the wealth, the fame, and the power. Which of course is something our freedom-loving Straw Hat won't stand for. He will come to realize that in order to free the world and claim the One Piece, Blackbeard must finally be defeated. Which is when the final long-awaited fight between the Blackbeard pirates and the Straw Hats will finally begin to take place. A fight that will not only determine the fate of the free world, but one that will also determine the fate of who becomes the king of the pirates. But now with the two most likely options out of the way, let's discuss someone many wouldn't even consider to be Luffy's final opponent, but someone I believe to be quite likely if you really think about it. It's Buggy the Clown. Now I know just as well as all of you that Buggy is a gag character, a weakling with nothing of note when talking about strength or fighting ability. He is essentially nothing more than a joke of a character. But realistically, if we're being totally honest, aside from Shanks, Buggy is the closest to becoming the Pirate King at this point in the story. Not just because he was once a member of Roger's crew, but because he has the exact thing Roger is said to have had when he himself became the king of the pirates. It's wealth, fame, and power. The rule of three that Oda so loves to use over and over again in his story. Buggy has all of those things at his disposal in Cross Guild. Allow me to explain. He brings with him more fame than anyone else in the entire world. He is more feared and loved than even the Revolutionary Army at this point in time, which is absolutely crazy to even imagine. Crocodile brings a lot, and I mean a lot, of wealth with him anywhere he goes. Wealth so large that he was even able to place incredibly large bounties on the Marines themselves. But now let's not forget who brings the power. Of course that couldn't possibly be Buggy or Crocodile. They both lost to a pre-time skipped Luffy. No, the power comes with the man who is also said to be a rival to even Shanks. It's Mihawk. The man who I also believe will be the second strongest character in the entire world after defeating the newly appointed Gorosei member Garling, who I also believe to be the quote-unquote adoptive dad / master of Mihawk himself. But to learn more about that whole family situation and that whole theory in general, check out my recent Mihawk theory video linked in the description down below. Now as it stands, Buggy and his crew does have Roger's rule of three: wealth, fame, and power. But what does that have to do with who One Piece's final villain will be? Well, aside from One Piece being about big fights and government propaganda, it is at the end of the day an adventure series about finding a long lost treasure. A treasure known as the One Piece. It's essentially a story about a race to the end of the line. And after everything is said and done, the real enemy to our hero is the guy who beats him to it. Which in mine and many others' opinion will be Buggy the Clown. Because as Julius Caesar once said himself, Buggy once came, once saw, and will of course one day return to conquer the seas. And with all jokes aside, I can really see a possible ending where Luffy beats both Imu and Blackbeard and then goes to finally claim the One Piece for himself, only to find that Buggy has already taken it. And as long as the One Piece isn't some sort of mystical power that turns Buggy from a pussy to a god, I think this will just be another callback defeat to where Luffy kicks Buggy in the balls and takes the One Piece for himself. Now obviously that wouldn't be much of a difficult fight for Luffy, but it would be a fight that also places Buggy as Luffy's final opponent, technically also making him Luffy's final fill-in defeat in the entire series. And what's more, with Mihawk's defeat over Garling and Luffy having already bested Imu and Blackbeard, Mihawk being technically Buggy's number 2 would also place Mihawk as the second strongest villain to be defeated in that arc, which would set up nicely for his fight versus Zoro, because as we've seen many times before, Zoro is commonly used to defeat the second strongest / vice captain characters in every single arc. So as Luffy defeats Buggy, Zoro will defeat Mihawk, finally taking that title that he has desired for so very long. And not to mention, I just can't really see Zoro getting that title until the very end of the series. So the end of the series happening like this is very possible if you ask me. But now with the 3 characters finally laid out in front of us like this, let's determine which of them we think is the most likely option to be the final villain of this story. Now right off the bat, I can admit that Buggy is the most unlikely, but only when compared to the others on this list. So let's just sack him off for now. Now Imu being the overarching enemy of the story that essentially spawned every single enemy that we've ever seen does make her incredibly likely in my opinion. But Blackbeard being the anti-Luffy / person responsible for Ace's death makes him being the final villain so much more personal for Luffy and us the viewers. So I'm gonna just have to lean towards Blackbeard being the final villain of the story. It just kind of fits so much better in my opinion for this 20 long year story to end with somebody that we personally despise. But now with all that said, you tell me down in the comments, who do you think it will be? Will it be Blackbeard or Imu? Or maybe even Buggy D Clown? Tell me all that in the comments down below. And while you're at it, why not like the video and subscribe for more videos like this in the future? But with all that said, I'm out. Have a great day or night wherever you are, and peace.